Hello. Hope the CLT test went well. We didn't get to meet live yesterday, obviously. Next week, I'd like to do maybe an extra live class if we can, especially now that we're reading Caesar. But we will talk about that tomorrow and on Monday. So for today, I'm going to go through some more lines from the Gallic Wars, and not going to be homework with it, but remember, I'll pull your exam from all these sentences that we're doing, so worth your time to go through this with me. Okay, so we're going to be looking at lines 14 through, what is this, 23. Okay, so 9 lines here, and just to keep it in context, so we don't miss the forest for the trees, we started with this geographical description of Gaul and then of the peoples that are in Gaul. And remember, Gaul's roughly France, but it's not like France isn't a thing in 50 BC. So it's this territory north of Italy, and there's different peoples there. Different peoples, and so that's the description Caesar's giving us at the beginning of his commentary on the Gallic Wars. And so now we're talking about this leader named Orgetorix. And so picking up where we left off, among the Helvetians. Oh yeah, and these people, the Helvetians, who live in what's now Switzerland. Okay. So among the Helvetians, by far the most noble and the wealthiest was Orgetorix. He, stirred up by a desire for rule, a desire of rule. That's an objective genitive. Stirred up by a desire for rule, he formed a conspiracy of the nobility. And therefore, and so he desired power of the whole of Gaul. And that looks back to line 1. All of Gaul is divided into 3 parts. But this guy wants power over the whole thing. And so that's what we're hearing about. Now we're going to read a little bit today about the geography of the place where the Helvetians live. And if you know about Switzerland, it's surrounded by mountains, right? So, Helvetii loci natura undique continenter. There's our first clause. So our verb, continenter. We're going to have to do a little digging in the dictionaries here today. But you can probably recognize that as third plural, passive, right? NTUR, it's present tense. Let's take a look at the verb. It's from contineo, which means, you know, teneo, hold. This is like hold together, okay? In the most literal sense. Hold together, bound, limit, comprise, enclose. Okay, so as a passive, I'm just thinking passive form, I'm thinking encircled by, enclosed by. And yeah, that'll work. Enclose all of this. Okay, so I think we can go from there. So they are enclosed, or they are encircled, let's say. And our subject's going to be Helvetii. The Helvetians are enclosed or are surrounded. Let's go with surrounded. I like that. The Helvetians are surrounded. Undique, this is an adverb, but everywhere, from all sides in context. They're surrounded from all sides or in all sides. From all sides. Okay, and now this is tricky. So there's some finer grammar things in here that you're probably not going to get on your own. So I'm going to be wary about how much I ask you about these really tricky things on your exam, but we can still go through them together here. So here's what's going on. You're surrounded by something in the ablative. So natura, go back to the dictionary again. As part of this, I want you to know how to use these Latin dictionaries. So natura, nature, natural construction, property or quality. I like that. So the natural constitution or quality of a thing, how something is set up, maybe. And so it's the natura loci, that's a second declension noun, of the place, the nature of the place. So the whole thing, the Helvetians are surrounded on all sides, undique. They're surrounded on all sides by the nature of the place. Okay, now they're in Switzerland. There's mountains all around it. That's what the sentence is pointing at. Now we're going to get more detail about all of that, and these are tricky things coming up, but bear with me. So we're going to take these one at a time. So unex parte flumine reno, latissimo atque altissimo. So right off the bat, we have a prepositional phrase with a noun and an adjective and some hyperbaton going on. So an interruption of like the expected grammatical structure. So ex with the ablative governs parte, here's our noun, a part, and then una, one. So the preposition governs both these words, even though una is before the preposition, okay? I think your book gives you a note something like with short noun adjective pairs, short words, this often happens. Again, it can be a neat little rhetorical effect too. I mean, that sounds nice. It's assonant, una ex parte at the very least. Now, we just translate it as if it's ex parte une. From one part, and part here doesn't mean like a part of my homework or something like that. It's more like from one side, from one sector. So we'll say from one side, flumine, reno. Now we're going to get a bunch of ablatives that are filling the same space as natura. So they're surrounded by means of or almost because of the nature of the place. From one side, they're surrounded by the river Reno, or they're, again, you got to be, here's where reading Latin's really good for your thinking, for being an agile thinker, because you've got to keep multiple definitions of this word in your mind at once. So we've got surrounded first, but it also means hem in or enclose or keep in. And we're going to have to go there a little bit with the meaning too. So from one side, they're hemmed in by the river, the Rhine River. Now, latissimo and altissimo both agree with Reno, and they're superlatives, superlative adjectives. So latus means wide, and altus means either tall or deep. We're talking about a river, so probably not going to be tall. Deep will work though. So they're surrounded from one part by the river Rhine, and they're superlative. So we're going to actually take these not as most high or most wide, because it's not absolute like that, but we can say very wide and very deep. They're hemmed in by the Rhine River on the one side, which is very wide and deep. And now qui, our relative pronoun here, this is just a relative clause. Its antecedent is reno. So reno is dative, singular masculine. Qui is nominative, singular masculine. The Rhine River, very wide, very deep, which, qui dividit, which separates. Helvetios separates the Helvetians, accusative, a Germanis, from the Germans, ablative of separation. Okay, tricky, and we're going to go back through all these at the end in some. Now, same grammatical structure is going to be repeated, so that's going to make this next sentence a little easier, just with different words. So now we have alter ex parte, so not un ex parte, altera. So from another sector, from another side, continenter, they're hemmed in Monte Jura, by Mount Jura, or I think it's a mountain range, by the Altissimo. Altus means tall, again, and here we're talking about a mountain, not a river, so we can take it as tall, not deep. So from another side, by the very tall Mount Jura. Jura, let me check the gender on this. Chain of mountains extending from the Rhine to the Rhone. Good. It's feminine. Oh, okay. I was confused about qui because qui is masculine. Qui is going to agree with Monte here. It's a little, we'll talk about this at the end, but there's some blurring of the lines going on with genders, you might notice. It's okay. You got to be loose when you're translating real Latin too. It's not always going to fit together exactly how it would in a textbook. but we can be pretty sure qui refers to monte. So from another side by the very tall Mount Jura, which, we have divided again, which divides the Sequanos, what people are these? Oh no, this is a river. This is the Zine, which, pardon me, this slipped my attention as I was reading to prepare. Okay, so this is something like people who live along the Zine. Okay. Which, the mountain which separates them, those people, from the Helvetians. Okay, sorry about that. And now we have another repetition of the grammatical structure with different words. So now we have tertiax parte. So from a third place, they are hemmed in by the lacu. This is from the word for lake. And Lemano refers to Lake Geneva. So from another part by Lake Geneva, and by the River Rhone, Flumine Rodano. The River Rhone, which divides Provinciam Nostrum, which divides our province from the Helvetians. Okay, that was pretty tricky, and we'll go through this at the end here. Let's take care of these last two sentences. Qua de causa, so we've already seen this once. That just means on account of which. So it refers to all that was just said. So because of all this, now tricky here, our main verb is pot erant. So this is from possum posse, be able. And hopefully you can recognize it as third plural imperfect. So remember it's basically the verb to be plus this stem that means ability or potential, P-O-T. So we've got they were able. That's our main verb. Now there's two adverbs modifying that main verb. And the first one is just known, so it's negated. They were not able. And then we've got facile. So facilis means easy. This is the adverb form. So easily. They were not easily able. They were not easily able. Okay, now we got to sort out the rest of this. And like we're used to seeing with possum posse, we have a complementary infinitive, filling out the meaning of the main verb. And infere. Okay, so this is a compound of the verb fero, which means carry, slightly irregular. And infere is just present active infinitive. But what's it mean? Bring in, introduce, carry in, bring to. This is going to be a little more difficult. We got to dig into the dictionary a bit. Throw upon, okay. Bear standards against the enemy, attack. We're getting closer now. Down here, bring forward, introduce, produce, or make. He's going to be talking, it's infere bellum, make war. Okay, so see, I had to go down almost all the way to the bottom of the dictionary entry, and I'll try as best I can when we get divergent meanings of words like this, or really metaphorical meanings. I'll try to point them out to you, but just in case you ever get stuck and are really looking, sometimes you have to go through the whole dictionary entry. But we're going to say infere means make war. Now, there's also this bit at the top, construction with in and the accusative, with odd, or with the dative. And that's going to refer to how this verb is being used, because like a verb like give almost always takes the dative with it, because you give something in the accusative to someone in the dative. Similar with infero. And compound verbs often do this. They often take a certain case with them. And it's sometimes just a matter of sorting through the dictionary entry. So the sense here is going to be make war on someone else. Okay, let's see what that actually looks like. So they were not able easily infere bellum to make war And now we have a dative plural, finitimis. This is an adjective, strictly speaking. So if you looked it up, finitimis, it's from finitimus aum for second declension adjective, which means bordering upon, adjoining, neighboring. Neighboring works for our purposes here. Okay, there's not a noun in the dative plural that agrees with it. So we're going to have to take this as a substantive adjective. And that's just an adjective used as a noun, right? So American, that's an adjective. You know, the American flag, adjective, noun. But you can also say Americans everywhere think that they should open the stores back up. Americans in that case is a substantive adjective. And you take the meaning of the adjective and then apply either men, women, people, things, a noun, a generic noun that makes sense. So let's see what makes sense. So to make war upon the neighboring peoples, I'm going to say, upon the neighboring peoples. So the whole thing, because of all this, because of their geography, they were not able to make war against neighboring peoples easily. And yet, autumn, however, it's adversative, and yet, they were, errant, they were cupidi, they were desirous. And remember, cupidi takes objective genitives because desire is a verb. This adjective has a very verby feel to it, and it's going to take objective genitives. So they were desirous, belly, of war, atque gloriae, and glory. They were desirous of war and glory. Okay, and again, let me just show you, and I'm showing you this Perseus resource, but in the hopes that you use it virtuously. Having translated the Latin or given it your best shot, you can always find, it's public domain, go to Perseus and find the English version of Gallic Wars, and you can check your translation. So I'm going to find what we just read. The Helvetii are confined on every side by the nature of their situation. On one side by the Rhine, a very broad and deep river which separates the Helvetian territory from the Germans. On a second by the Jura, a very high mountain which is situated between the Sequani and the Helvetii. On a third by the Lake of Geneva, and by these and by the river Rhone, which separates our province from the Helvetii. From these circumstances, it resulted that they could range less widely and could less easily make war upon their neighbors. For which reason men fond of war, as they were affected with great regret. Okay, so you can probably see there's certain things that our text leaves out because they're difficult, more or less. What you're reading is very close to the real Latin, so feel good about it, but there's parts they omit. It's like an abridged version of a text. I'll go back through this whole passage now. I don't need to read it in Latin. You can read the Latin yourself. So among the Helvetians, the most noble and the wealthiest by far was Orgetorix. He, led by desire for rule, he made a conspiracy of the nobility. For indeed, he desired power over all of Gaul. The Helvetii, I'm going to say Helvetians. The Helvetians are hemmed in by the nature of their place. They're hemmed in on all sides by the nature of the place. On one side, by the river Rhine, very wide and very deep, which divides the Helvetians from the Germans, which separates the Helvetians from the Germans. On another side, by Mount Jura, which is very tall, which divides the Sequani from the Helvetians. On a third side, by Lake Geneva and by the Rhone River, which separates our province from the Helvetians. Because of all this, because of the geography of the place they lived, because of which they were not able to make war against neighboring peoples easily. And yet, they were desirous of war and of glory. Okay, so that is kind of the next section of our text. Again, I'm not going to give you homework on that. in particular because we weren't supposed to have class today anyhow, but might come up on your exam, and we got to keep following the story. So we will talk to you tomorrow for the next 10 lines or so.